Okay, so we're going to continue Hilchos Niddah, Siman Kuf Tzadik Ches. We're holding Seif Lamed Aleph. Just a small review of Halacha that we learned last time about a woman that needs some help to go down to the mikveh. What is the best way to hold on to her? One should not hold on too tight. Obviously, you want the water to get everywhere. So the Mechaber just mentioned the detail. Unless, of course, the one who's holding on to her holds on not too tight in order so the water can get everywhere. But he also adds, if she rinsed her hands in water before then, shori, it's permissible as well. The water, the moistness on her hands connects with the waters of the mikveh. So the question is, how should she rinse her hands, and what kind of water? The helper, right? The helper. So the Shach makes a note here that dafka b'mei mikveh, where she rinses her hands, they should dafka be in the waters of the mikveh. It's not just that we want her to rinse her hands under the water of a faucet, and then say that the waters of the mikveh will be metahir the waters of the faucet when they connect. The Shach says no. That's the intent here is dafka b'mei mikveh v'lo b'mayim tlushim, and not with disconnected water, meaning water that is not part of the mikveh. Whereas the Taz says pirush afilu b'mayim tlushim. Why? Once they connect those waters, the little bit of water that she rinsed her hands with, once they connect to the mayim of the mikveh, they will also become kosher, because mashke tofeach hu chibur. All it is a little bit of moistness that can constitute a chibur to the mikveh. All right, but anyway, the question here is, and we didn't really speak about it last time, but it's more important and more relevant to the halachas of today that we'll be covering now, is what's this idea of really going down with some help? Just to read the Mechaber, all it says is that one should not hold the hand of another. One should be careful so that the water can get everywhere. But I was thinking today about a real life situation where a woman is disabled. How does a disabled woman today go to a mikveh if she's somewhat paralyzed, using a wheelchair? Now, a wheelchair poses many problems. You just can't go in with a wheelchair into the mikveh. There's several complications with that, and some of it we will see soon. There are certain mikvahs in the world that are built with this in mind, that they have the levers or the mechanics that are necessary to lower a woman who's disabled into the mikveh in a proper way, that it should not in any way be a chatzitza. And as we will see later on today, we will be talking about immersing in a keli, in a vessel within a mikveh, can pose a problem, can be an issue. You really need to go into the water directly without sitting in something. So there are certain mikvahs that are built in order to accommodate all sorts of disabilities. And in those mikvahs or those situations where they don't have the facilities for that, that's where help will be required. I mean, just because a woman is disabled or has a difficult going in herself or standing at all times, does not mean that she can never go to the mikveh anymore and Chaz v'Shalom no longer be able to have a physical relationship with her husband. All right? I mean, we don't want to prevent that. So there can be times and situations where a woman may need help. And disabilities would be one example where I could think of where she would want to have two people, not just one, helping her going down to the mikveh. Okay, I thought that would be relevant to what we're learning here. Now, in Seif Lamed Aleph, the Mechaber talks about all kinds of situations where people may want to sit. People may want to go into the mikveh and perhaps if there is a ladder, go down the ladder. Where there is a keli, there is some sort of vessel within the mikveh. When does that pose a problem? When does it does not pose a problem? And this is all taken from the Mishnah, from the Gemara, as to the various concerns that the Chachamim had about going into something other than directly into the mikveh. So before we see the Mechaber inside, let me just quote to you what Tosfos says in Psachim, in the Rosh as well, that the din of Tvila, that if the water, you have the right amount of water, but if the water is not in the karka, not in the ground, it's only in a keli, even if it has the 40 se'ah, it's still pasul min Torah. And this we learn from Torah's Kohanim. It's brought down there on the pasuk Ach Mayan Ubor Mikre Mayim Yetor, that just like a mayan, a spring needs to be in the karka, same thing with the bor, a pit, which is pretty much what a mikveh is, needs to be in the karka. It needs to be connected to the ground, part of the ground.
But wait a minute, our Mikvaot today are all tiled and all fancy?
Yeah, they're tiled, but it's all, that tile is all connected to the ground. So when we go Mitzvah Shem into Hilchos Mikvaot, we will see what the criteria is, what is possible and what is not possible as far as the tubing is concerned and so forth. Yeah, there's a lot of detail on that. But the tile does not pose a problem in itself, because it's all part of the karka. It becomes part of the whole, of the ground. But in a situation where the water is in the ground, but he is immersing himself on top of a keli, on a bench, right, on a ladder that's down there, right? So he is in the water, and that water is in the ground. He's standing on or sitting on a keli. In this, there's no psul doraita. That is not a psul from the Torah. So what is the problem then? The Gemara discusses two problems, two difficulties, or two reasons why we don't allow to be toivel in a keli. Gemara brings down that one should not stand agabe kli cheres, even if it's earthenware, which means it's not mekabel tuma. Why? One reason is that maybe we're concerned that she's not going to immerse herself properly because she's afraid. So to stand on something else where there is a concern that she may not do it right because she may fall, she may not, do it the way you're supposed to. Instead, don't put anything there where she may have some, issue with, that it may be not stable. So it's therefore not a good idea for the woman to stand on a kli cheres, because the tevilah may not be a good tevilah. The Raavad, however, says that there is another explanation brought down, that even though according to others that other explanation is really not lemaskana, is not the conclusion of the Gemara, he still believes that this is as well an additional explanation as to why we do not allow one to be toivel on a keli in the mikveh, and that has to do with gzeras merchatzois. It was a decree of the Chachamim, and we learned this out from the Mishnah in Mikvaot, Megabe immersing there on a bench. And he says like this, that when it comes to a kli that is mekabel tuma, if the kli is mekabel, the vessel is mekabel tuma, then we have this gzera. What's the gzera? The gzera is that since in bathhouses they have benches, or they have places where people could sit on, even though they're made out of clay, people might make a mistake of saying, well, if I was able to do it there, sit there, and have no problem with that, then this would possibly also be allowed in a mikveh. So the Chacham made a gzera of merchatzois, of bathhouses, that people might come to make the mistake that in the same way that they are able to sit down on merchatzois, on top of the itztabois made out of clay adomo that are similar to clay cheres, they may think that one is also able to immerse himself in such kelim. However, the Aruch HaShulchan asks, then why should there be a difference the guy is standing on top of a klei cheres or on top of a davar shemekabel tuma. Immersing oneself in a keli which is mekabel tuma or in a klei cheres is also. There's no difference. Then why should there be a difference on standing on top of a klei cheres versus standing on davar shemekabel tuma? So he says that there's really no issue to stand on a keli in the mikveh, but it's only because of the toes that people might make. They may become confused that in the same way that they were able to stand in a davar mekabel tuma, they can also immerse themselves in the davar shemekabel tuma. But in a klei cheres, there's no such chashash that they will come to make this mistake. Keli that is not mekabel tuma, a klei cheres, for example, would not be included in that gzera. Okay, so let's see it inside. Mechaber says in Sif Lamed Aleph, Ein toivlim bekelim, we don't immerse in kelim. Lefichach im hoyo tit b'mokom shetoveles, if there was some mud in the place where she is immersing herself, lo ta'amod, she should not stand al gabe kli eitz, on some wooden vessel, shemekablim tumo migabon, right from the top they are mekabel tumo, velo al gabe nesarim, neither should she stand on all kinds of planks, sheruim lemidrasot, which are really made and fashioned out for this purpose to stand on. Velo al shum keli hara'ui lemidras, neither should she stand on anything which is pretty much mekabel tuma, because it's royu lemidras, where it is made for standing on, or it can be used to stand on. V'titbol, and in this way she should immerse herself. No, she cannot do that. Why? Mechaber, all he says is mishum gzeras merchatzois shel kelim. Because of that gzera that I mentioned of merchatzois, where people may come to confuse that it's okay to immerse yourself in a keli itself.
Why is he only concerned with a mikveh that might have mud or dirt at the bottom, or was he thinking that was the standard mikvot for his day?
Well, right now we're concerned not so much about chatzitzas, which we'll see later again.
The way you phrased it, he said, if there is teeth, if there is mud on the bottom,
she would want to put something on top of the teeth, right? She doesn't want her feet to go directly.
Okay, I was trying to.
Right. So she doesn't want to stand in the teeth. As it is, the teeth could be a problem for chatzitza too, or maybe for cleanliness purposes. She just wants to immerse herself above that. So she cannot just put a keli that is mekabel tuma and stand on it. But if she did immerse herself, it doesn't count. So b'di'evet the Mechaber says it's not going to count, this tevila. What can she do? She can put bunches of twigs, branches underneath her feet that are not mekabel tuma. Why would she do that? They're teeth, obviously because of the mud there. Well, what about if it's a kli cheres? On that, the Mechaber gives us a second explanation. She should not stand on a earthenware vessel, and not even on a bakat, which is like a beam of wood. The titbol, and she in this way immerse herself. Even though a kli cheres does not accept tuma migaba from the top, only from within. This may not necessarily be good to sit on, or I should say to step on. It's not made for that. Chash chachomim, it's a concern that the chachomim had. Shema tefached. Maybe she will be afraid. Shelo tipol, that she will not fall. Velo titbol karaui, and she will not immerse herself properly. In this second example, however, avra v'tavla gabe elu, if she did immerse herself on top of these, Al-tala tevilah, the tevilah does count. So the second concern which the Mechaber does bring down, which applies also to klei cheres, he gives the explanation that is the chashash of the chachamim, that she may be afraid to immerse herself properly. So this one, neither should she do this one. However, in this example, in case she did, also the tefillah, here the Mechaber says that b'di'evet, this one does count. The Rashba and the Ran also agree with the Raavad that the reason is the way the Raavad explained the Mishnah, that we have a different kind of a concern here. And there was a concern of the Gemara that she may not immerse herself properly is not necessarily the only concern. It's also because of Gzeras Merchatzois. So we need to be aware of these two explanations because it could make a difference depending on what exactly is in the mikveh. However, the Rash explains this a little bit different, the Mishnah. He's saying that Mishnah has a whole different concern. Over there it's talking about a safsal, like a bench, and that is inside the mikveh, and they were goizer that by mistake somebody may put a keli at the location where the mayan connects into the mikveh, and it will become possible because of mayim she'uvim, waters that are being received or collected, I should say, in such a way that will render the mikveh possible. You cannot have waters that are collected in such a way, and when we learn Mikvaot we'll get into that. That's called mayim she'uvim, collected, like into a bucket, into a keli, as opposed to flowing directly from the rain or from the mayan. So that's the way the Rash interprets that Mishnah, that the concern over there is that he may make the mistake of putting a keli in the mokum where the waters come out from the mayan, where they enter the mikveh. In this way it will be possible. The Tur says that the Rosh as well explains that Mishnah about Safsal in a different way, and that the Gzer was that he might actually immerse himself inside of a keli. In other words, in complete mayim she'uvim, not like the Raavad says. Okay, if that's the case, we need to understand the next example in the Mechaber, because apparently the Mechaber is going to be machmir on a ladder that sometimes is necessary to go down into a mikveh, whereas lechatchila, by the way, the ideal situation is that you just have steps going down, cement steps, so you don't have a problem with the material it's made of and it's connected to the ground. But as we will see here, the Mechaber's example is important because it could happen that's the only possibility of entering a mikveh in shlivois, as it's called, in steps of a ladder. So Mechaber says like this: Lefi zeh mikveh sheyesh bo shlivois, pirush madrigot, all kinds of steps, shel eitz, of wood that go into the mikveh. In tavla gabeh shlivot, if she immersed herself while she's on the ladder, so she didn't step off the ladder, but she immersed herself while she's on the shlivot, even if they are connected, even if they're connected to the walls of the mikveh, according to the Mechaber, the tevila does not count. Why? Because the pshute kli'etz, first of all, even though they're wood, they're pshute kli'etz, they already have form. The Mechaber says all you have to do instead would be to make steps of stones. What's the idea of saying that pshute kli'etz? Because even though it's kli'etz, it's out of wood, it's still metamim derabanan. And the fact that it's pshute, that it's flattened out, does serve a purpose. Even though you might think, well, if it's flat, it's incomplete yet. It really hasn't been fashioned into a keli. Yes, but it is possible to use them as steps in the ladder. The pshute kli'etz. In other words, as the Gra explains over here, the chazil madrigot, you could use them for steps. So therefore, the best thing to do is to make steps of stones. The Chaber adds, just make sure that the steps should be wide 4 tefachim, makom anochas haregel, just enough that you could put the foot down. We want to make sure that she will be able to immerse herself in such a way that she's not afraid that she will fall. Okay, so we want to make sure that as she is immersing herself or going down the steps, that she has enough room to put her feet down, where there will be a shear of a mikveh. When we learn mikvahs, we will see that they're not necessarily all made the same. You can have a mikveh that is deep, You can have a mikveh that is shallow, big, narrow, as long as there's a shear. The question is, can she easily bend? Can she easily go down? Will the waters completely cover her? Because you could have the required amount, but it's too shallow. So when we get to that, we'll discuss the details of how to make a mikveh the right way. But here, the concern is that she should immerse herself in the right amount of water while not hesitating, because she may fear that she may fall. Alright, so here, legabe the shlibois, legabe the steps, the mechaber was machmer. The Taz, however, says that that's not the halacha because we have a different minhag. Same thing with the shach. That the reason why it has been accepted, he says, to stand on shlibois of wood in a mikveh is not going according to the Rabbit's pshat, it's going according to the Rash and the Rosh of the way they learned the Mishnah. So that the whole concern there was nothing to do with gzeras merchatzois. But there was a gzera that, a person may think, either, depending if you learn like the Rash or the Rosh, either like the Rash, that there may be a time where a person may make a mistake and put a keli in a place where he should not put the keli, where it will render the mikveh not kosher, or like the Rosh that said that we're concerned that he may immerse himself in that particular kind of a keli. So based on that explanation, the Taz says there's no real issue. We should have really no issue with a stepladder of sorts, or with a ladder, I should say, of Nesorim, because that would not pose any problem if it's made out of wood. So the Taz and the Shach both say that the minhag was to allow a woman to go down on steps made out of wood. And this is for different reasons. The Shach and the Taz give different explanations. The Shach basically says the difference is that when the ladder is ready beforehand, so it has been made into a keli, then if you put it in, there could be a problem. But if you're building it into the walls of the mikveh, if as you go, you build it into the mikveh, then that you don't have that problem of having a keli here to begin with. There's no keli. As it is, there's poiskim that hold that any keli that's made from the very start on condition, in other words, with the whole idea of serving the karka, it will be connected to the ground. It will be placed in the wall like a handrail. It's not mekabel tumah. That's a very important point. And we need to know that when we learn Hilchas Mikvaot, that if it's designated from the very beginning, I'm making this not as a multi-purpose tube. I'm making this to serve the mikveh, and it's going to be immediately part of the walls or the floor. Then it's not mekabel tumah. There are some who hold like that. Also, since these are pshutei eights, the ladder, out of plain wood, they don't really have a form or shape. So the tumah is midrabanan. So once you nail them down, you basically are mevato from them any shame keli. The Taz is only concerned about that these shlivas should be rechovim arba. She should not be concerned about falling off. Now, based on this halacha of kelim, you may wonder, how is it possible to go to the mikveh of kelim with cutlery inside of a net? If you've ever taken new cutlery, now a pot or a pan is not a problem. You just stick it in, make sure that your grip is loose so the water gets everywhere. But knives, forks, and spoons, usually we take it in a net and just dip the whole thing. But isn't the net a keli? So here we're dipping kelim. We're not talking about human beings here now. We're dipping kelim into a mikveh through a keli, through another keli of sorts. So in Shiur Shevet HaLevi he explains that there's no concern about this net since it's made out of nylon. And nylon is not a mekabel tumah. He also explains over there that it's mutter to be toivel on top of a clay cheres or piece of wood, if there is a place where she can hold on to, like a handrail. In other words, if there's something there that she can hold on to, and therefore she will not be afraid, then there shouldn't be any problem with standing on something either. Because remember, standing on something, on a kli, was one of the concerns was that she may be afraid if it's not big enough. But if there's something else there that she can hold on to, then it would be mutter lechatchila. All right, let's go on.
So that she can immerse on top of the container?
Right, or a kli cheres container. Yeah. One of the concerns was that she may be afraid that she may not do a good job. So that's why we don't do it. So Basar says that if there's something in the mikveh that she can hold on to, and therefore there won't be this concern that she may fall, then she's allowed to stand on something. There's no problem with this. Yeah, you were saying about the...
Based on that, it would make logical sense then that we should, in the mikvahs today, put some kind of plastic line across to help the women.
Sure.
But we don't see that.
No, there's no need. Today, the way they're built is that they're, everything is smooth, normal stairs going down.
And some women, would, if they had.
Oh, sure.
Problems.
So those that have disabilities, they need to be done in such a way that the materials are not mekabel tuma.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sure, they take that into consideration. Chairs made out of plastic, for example. Oh, yes. When we learn about that, we'll get into it.
It just seems like
sure.
Now that we have this ability with, modern chemicals and science, we could make life.
Oh, sure. Yeah, definitely. In the absence of all that, you can imagine that such women would need help to hold on to them. There's no other choice. How are you going to do it? It could actually be even more dangerous if she would go in with her wheelchair, into anything. She could slip off. So there's no mechanism that can facilitate it, hydraulic, some sort. Then that's what they have. Without that, she would need help, physical help from probably two women. Next, סעיף ל"ב, סילון של עץ הקבוע בקרקעית התפילה, ממנו לבזבז, פירוש מסגרת שאז אין לו בית קיבול, מותרת לעמוד עליו ולטבול. Silon is a tube, which we'll also talk about more in Siman Reish Aleph in Mikvaot. A tube that's running down below the mikveh that's kavua. It's already affixed to the ground and used as a drain from which the water flows out. If it doesn't have the levazbaz, in other words, a frame that makes it into a sort of container, rims on the sides, muteret lamod alav velitbol, she would be able to stand on it and immerse herself because that's affixed to the ground and she's not going to be afraid of falling off. According to the Mechaber's explanation is that since it has no levazbaz, it has no frame, in other words, doesn't have a base kibble, that is why it's mutter. That's all he says over here. The Taz explains that because it's affixed to the ground, so she has no fear of standing on it. According to the Torah, he would say that even if it had a frame, it would be mutter, according to the Rosh, for another reason. And that is that the Gzeira on Kelim, the way he learns, the way his father learned, was concerning the possibility that a person may put a keli from where the water enters the mikveh. If that's the way you learn the Mishnah, then this is not an issue at all. This is affixed to the ground. There's no concern whatsoever. Even if it had levazbaz, even if it had the ability to contain water, it wouldn't be a problem. So this is a wooden tube that's affixed to the ground. According to the Mechaber, as long as it does not have a frame to contain the water, then it would not be considered the keli. Taz says that since this is affixed to the ground, she's not afraid of standing on it. So that's why it's okay. Sif Lamed Gimel Lo Titbol B'Makom Sheyesh B'Karka'ito Tit. Here the Mechaber talks about mud again, that lechatchila a woman should not immerse herself in a place where at the very bottom of the mikveh there is mud. Mishum chatzitza, because of the problems associated with chatzitza, that she puts her feet down, it's going to get dirty. Elam kain, unless titen alav zemorot, unless she puts all kinds of branches, similar material like the branches. Davar she'eno mekabel shum tumah, as long as it's not mekabel shum tumah. V'in tovla, And if she immerses herself nonetheless without those items, some say that the tevilah doesn't count. And Dvoiv Poiskim are matir. So the question is, what's the problem over here? Especially when we know from elsewhere that you can immerse a bed into a mikveh to be mitar the bed, even though there's mud, because we say as soon as the bed goes in, the water already has reached all the parts. So why don't we say here the same thing? As soon as she enters the mikveh, she hasn't gotten to the mud yet. Her feet should already be mitar. I mean, she's going in. Eventually there's going to be some mud at the bottom. So why should there be a problem over here? Now this halacha is learned from the Gemara that talks about women going to the port and immersing there. And Rashi seems to be saying that the reason why that is not a good idea is because there is mud there, and the mud is choitzitz. But most poskim were matir, because that scenario, that example of mud should not be any different than the bed that is going into the mikveh. As soon as the feet of the bed enter the water, it becomes tar. So why should this be any different, even though there is mud there? So the Taz speaks about it. It appears to be that the Mechaber was more concerned here than with the bed, because with the feet of a human being, there is a concern that whatever mud does get in will stick much more in between the fingers. Others say if the situation involves tit hayoven, thick mud, then you would not even say the halacha of a bed, that the bed is tar, because it gets much more sticky. The Shach says that halacha lemaisa, we are mekel to immerse in naharos that have tit, that have mud, because the mud that is found in those locations is not really thick mud and does not pose a problem of chatzitza. And most poskim do not follow the reasoning of Rashi. Anyway, the Mechaber's solution was, if you put branches on top of the mud, then that's okay. Mechaber holds, according to Yesh Oimrim, that if she did immerse herself without the branches, that also the tevilah doesn't count. But we said that most poskim are matir. We're not machmer in this case, in the same way that we allow for a bed to be immersed in the mikveh. The same logic applies over here, that the waters are going to reach the feet before she ever gets to the mud. Lo titbo b'mokom sheyesh chashash shiyiruo b'nei odom mipnei shemetoch kach memahez titbo. The Mechaber says a woman should not go to the mikveh in a place where there is concern that people may see her, because she may hurry to immerse herself, ve'ino medakdekes b'tefillah, and she may not be medakdek on how well she is toivel. B'diavad also the tevilah, but b'diavad her tevilah counts. We assume that she did it okay. Sif lamed hey, lo titvol b'koimo skufo. The Sif talks about the proper way of immersing herself into the mikveh. She should not go down erect completely. B'sheyesh mekomo shemistatrim bo. There may be some spots on her body that, as a result of her posture, will be concealed. Al tashche harbe, neither should she bend down too much until certain parts of her body that are concealed will be much more covered as a result. The way to do it is as a shocha me'at, she dips a little bit, not too much, until the lower part of her body is all revealed, in the same way that it is when she is making dough. In other words, the way her body is positioned in such a way that all the folds and all those areas of her lower body pretty much, exposed. And underneath her breast, it should look, or it should appear in the same way it appears when she is nursing her child. And underneath her armpits, it should appear the same way as though she would be weaving, standing. So these are all descriptions that Chazal give us of the best position for her to take in order for the water to get everywhere. She doesn't have to split her legs too much, one from the other. She doesn't have to extend her arms too much from her body. You tell me that too much. In the same way that they are when she's walking. But if she did change, she did do it differently. She bent down too much, or she stood up too much, too straight. Also la tevila. We say that the tevila counts, but he does bring down the opinion, also. Some say it doesn't count. So the question is, why not? Why would it be so machmer? If she did not do it in the proper way, that it should be any concern. As she's going down, we could say that the water has reached all the spots. Later on, maybe she bends, maybe later on it becomes concealed, but as she's going down, it should be okay. So the Taz explains that here the concern was sheyidbeku akmotim she'em beguf lemala min hamayim. There are certain spots on her body that are above the level of the water, that because of her position, they are closed. So when she comes down to the water, those spots will still be closed. So Lefizeh, he says, if she goes down all the way till her neck, first, that would be a perfect tefillah in every sense, he says. And he says, in other words, a woman should go down as far as possible. In other words, that the water should reach as high as possible, in order that it should get there. It should get to all the areas that are kmotim, that are folds, wrinkles, and the like. Anyway, we're not so makbid on this, even though we do, of course, instruct the women to make sure that every part of her body reaches the water, and she should immerse herself in such a way that does allow for the water to get everywhere. So lechatchila, that's the way to do it. There's obviously a reason for this, otherwise the Mechaber wouldn't quote this. There are spots that are maybe concealed. Imagine if she held her arms close to her body as she's going down, because she's cold. So she does have to loosen her arms, she does have to bend a little bit, not too much, and so forth, in order that it should be a proper tevilah. The mikveh, the waters of the mikveh should be of the height, at the very least, a zeret above her belly button. A zeret is, in English, the span between the thumb and the little finger, which is about 9.5 inches, 10 inches. That's a good height for her to be able to dip and to cover her body. There are some who say some say that even if the height of the waters of the mikveh are not high enough to cover her entire body, unless she's completely facing down with her body to the ground, it's still okay. As long as you have the correct amount of water, it's fine. Obviously there is a more ideal setting of how a mikveh should be and how much water there will be, which we'll cover another time. But sometimes, if that's all you have to do with, then you do it, as best as you can, by making sure that the water gets everywhere. She doesn't have to open her mouth that the water should enter, but neither should she close it too tight. As you recall from the past, we spoke about this, about the lips. Or according to the one opinion, it's not the problem with the lips, it's the problem of that it has to be technically possible for the waters to enter the mouth, even though the waters don't have to go into the mouth. So therefore, in Kaf Salah also not tefillah, the Mechaber says if she closed her mouth too tight, the tefillah doesn't count. All she should do is keep her lips shut as it is done in the average way, in a medium way, not too tight. Neither should she shut her eyes too tight, neither should she open them too much. If she did so, some say that the tefillah doesn't count. I don't think we hold like this. In other words, we hold that even though you're not supposed to shut your eyes too much, if she did so, it's okay. The reason for this of why this could also be a concern is again because of certain spots in the eyes, in the area of the eyes that the water may not get to as a result of making it very tight. Others, however, hold that the tightness in those areas would not be of any concern. Any wrinkles or any folds that are there are naturally there, and the waters would pretty much get there regardless. But lechatchila, obviously, she has to be careful just to be herself and not to do it too much, because according to some it would present a problem. That's what the Mechaber says. All yesh oimrim. Some say that it's a problem. And the Shach brings down here that there's a difference between this and lips. By lips is definitely more of a concern, whereas with the eyes, the kmotim, those wrinkles, those folds around the eyes are not going to hold back the water so much. Whereas with the lips, we were more machmir, because with the lips, it could be that the way she closes her mouth, she will be covering part of it. So over there's more reason to be machmir, and over here, with the Eved, one could be mekel. All right.